Steve here. It's the show where I answer your questions, and this week my first question comes from Ingerward Shirase. When you recorded this, you probably had no idea what would happen today, what with the U.S. military firing near 60 cruise missiles into a Syrian airbase. Am I the only one who doesn't think that it was justified because of the poison gas airstrike attack earlier this week? Would there ever be a case when this sort of action is justified? That is an excellent question, and I think another question that you almost have to ask when you ask the question that you asked, would this ever be justified, is does it ever turn out well when we, meaning the United States, do the sort of thing that we did? And I think the answer to that question is no. Because think about what we did in Syria last week. We acted unilaterally without support from our allies. And not only that, but Trump ordered the military operation, the bombing, the launching of those missiles against that Syrian airbase without congressional approval. And then you add on that another layer of the operation that was carried out in Syria by our military, the launching of those 58 missiles, I believe it was, accomplished absolutely nothing, did nothing to remove the Syrian government's ability to deploy chemical weapons against the population, did nothing to halt operations in any significant way at the airbase that was targeted, and was not part of any kind of larger strategy for how to deal with the Syrian civil war or the Syrian government using chemical weapons against its own people. And as I said in the video I made on the subject last week that I put up this past Monday, when you transfer that recklessness and ignorance and lack of coherence and long-term planning that is typical of Trump to military operations, it becomes absolutely terrifying. So, I mean, as long as Trump is commander-in-chief, the answer is always going to be no. Is that sort of action justified? If Trump is the commander-in-chief, no, it's not. Sabrina Lozides Meredith, Steve, what is your favorite movie theme? And who is your favorite film composer? I think one of my favorites is the theme from the 1989 Batman film. I'm a big Danny Elfman fan. My dad, however, leans more to John Williams. What's your favorite? I love John Williams' score for Superman. I think that's a magnificent score. It's big and loud and heroic and bombastic, but it's also very elegant and very quiet in places. You know, very sweet and soothing and charming. And I just think it's a magnificent score, and it suits its character perfectly, and it suits the story of that film perfectly, which is exactly what a movie score should do. But if I had to pick my absolute favorite, I would probably have to go with Bernard Herrmann's score for Vertigo. Especially the opening title sequence, the opening title music of Vertigo with that amazing animated opening title sequence and that main title theme that gives the sensation of falling, you know, of tumbling uncontrollably further and further, deeper and deeper, is just, I think it's my personal favorite score and certainly my personal favorite main title theme. And speaking of Danny Elfman, Danny Elfman's score, particularly his opening title theme for one of my favorite superhero movies, Ang Lee's Hulk. Danny Elfman did the score for that, and his opening title theme, very reminiscent of Bernard Herrmann's opening title for Vertigo. I think there was a lot of inspiration drawn by Danny Elfman because his opening title theme for Hulk has a very Bernard Herrmann Vertigo quality to it, and I quite like that score as well. Umar Sories, how would you get people out to vote? What do you think will get the numbers to make voter suppression not work because of sheer numbers? How would you suggest this can be done? Because frankly, telling people they must vote or else has never worked. Trump's election should prove that, if nothing else. It's another one of those questions where I wish I had a definitive answer to it. I mean, it's a great question, and it is something that it needs to be brought up because you're right. I mean, I can sit here making YouTube videos and shake my finger at people all day and say, you got to go vote. But yeah, you're right. Historically speaking, that doesn't work with very many people. I think on the ground, get out the vote efforts from the political parties, the local political parties, local Democratic Party organizations are vital. I think going and knocking on doors, going and finding people who are registered to vote with your party and saying, hey, the election's this Tuesday. Are you going to vote? Can we count on you? Do you need a ride? Do you know where your polling place is? Have you gotten a sample ballot? Do you know who you're voting for? I think those very practical, in-person, on-the-ground efforts are necessary to literally turn out the vote, to go get people and say, it's time to go vote. We need your vote. We're counting on you. Come vote with us. I think it has to come down to stuff like that, because you can only shame people so far, and a lot of people don't respond to that. A lot of people will hear some know-it-all asshole like me say, "Hey, you gotta go vote," and they'll just say, "Fuck you. You don't know you don't know my life. You don't know me. You don't know my priorities. How dare you try to guilt trip me into voting?" And it just doesn't work. It backfires. So I think it has to come down to just, very simple, basic, in-person, on the ground, hitting the streets, knocking on doors efforts to get people out to vote. Archive of Truth. What is your favorite religion out of the world religions? Out of all the faiths, do you find any at all that you could say have good moral systems or have decent life lessons? I think Buddhism does personally. I would call myself somewhat of an agnostic atheist, as I'm not sure if God exists or not. I feel like maybe he or she did at one point, but has since either died or stopped caring about humans. I think there are things about all religions, because they are human creations, they are human institutions, and therefore they are reflections of us, that are interesting or that have some things of value. I think a lot of it depends on how a particular religion is interpreted. Christianity, as practiced by some Christians, has a great deal of moral value, teaches a lot of wonderful lessons, and gives people all kinds of encouragement to go out and be wonderful moral people. But Christianity, as practiced by some other people, is absolutely horrible. Same thing for Judaism and Islam and Hinduism and any faith you can think of. If it's practiced in a way that is humane and decent, that prioritizes charity and love and forgiveness and treating people well and advocating for the rights of the less fortunate, then I think that's great. But if you practice it in a way that is authoritarian and that is closed-minded and that persecutes those who are outside the church and encourages intolerant attitudes in the followers of the faith, then I think that's bad. Adam Rainstopper. So, Steve, actually, the position you seem to be attributing to me is incorrect. I say seem to because you kind of drew a rigid dichotomy between a trans person announcing what kind of genitalia they have to everyone at the bar that night versus not telling anyone. I have to ask you to clarify. Being a trans/cis is a fundamental piece of who you are, and lying about who you are to get sex from someone is exactly what I was talking about. Is it your position that it is okay for a trans person to pretend to be cis in order to obtain sexual consent from someone they know would not give it otherwise? No, that is not my position. And I think there may be some confusion in this question because not everybody's mind goes to the same place when you say something like a trans person pretending to be cis. Because for some folks, unfortunately for many folks, a stealth trans person, that is a trans person who passes as their gender identity. So if a cis person like me would look at the person in question, I would not think, oh, that's a trans person. I just would think, oh, there's a girl or there's a boy. And it wouldn't enter into my mind whether they were trans or cis or whatever. Some folks would consider that to be a trans person pretending to be a cis person. I wouldn't. I don't know if you would or not. But that's not what I mean. If you're asking, is it okay for a trans person who knows that they wouldn't be able to have sex with a person unless the person thought they were cis to say, I'm a cis person, then no, I don't think that's okay. And if the person they want to sleep with has expressed in the past, or they happen to know that this person would not be willing to sleep with a trans person for whatever reason, and they pretend to be cis in order to fuck that person, then no, I'm not okay with that. And that's not what I was talking about, and I don't think that's what the person who asked the follow-up question that I responded to last week was getting at. They were talking about trans people who pass, so to speak, and whether or not it's right for them to do that, whether or not they are being inherently dishonest by just being who they are and looking how they look. And my answer to that is, it's not incumbent on any trans person to resolve any confusion that there might be in the mind of other people as to whether they're cis or trans. They're just being who they are. And trans women are women, and trans men are men, and the details of their genitalia or whatever, or their post-op, pre-op status are completely beside the point and irrelevant, and not their responsibility to smarten all of us up about. Bruce Bartup, Steve, if the Steve Shives channel convinces me that I am right, shouldn't I, as a skeptic, desub? Do we have more to fear from certainty, which feels nice, or from doubt, being a cuck, which is more cautious but very costly in terms of time and energy? How does one balance a decision between the over-impulsive simplification and over-examination and quandary hugging, trying to duck the consequences of making the wrong decision? Might such a balance be found by producing argument in cooperation with one's most loathsome adversary? For our enemies have the best counter-arguments. I'd say doubt is generally better, but I'm not certain of that. I think it would be useful to draw a distinction between thinking that you are right and thinking that you cannot possibly be wrong, because you're probably wrong about a lot of stuff. At any given moment in your life, you're probably wrong about a lot of stuff. You might be right about more stuff than you are wrong, but you're still probably wrong about a lot of stuff. And you should never allow yourself the vanity of believing that you can't possibly be wrong. So if I give you that feeling, or if something else or someone else gives you that feeling, I don't know if it's necessary to do anything as drastic as, stop listening to that person or unsubscribe from that person's channel or whatever, stop watching their show, stop listening to their podcast. But I do think it would be prudent to start broadening your horizons a little bit. And as for how do you find that middle ground between absolute certainty and inescapable doubt where you just can't make a decision? I mean, I find, practically speaking, that it's better to lean towards certainty when you're making a decision. And then if it turns out you made the wrong decision, chalk that up as a learning experience and use that to inform decisions that you make in the future. Jay Bird. Hey Steve, this is related to my semi-rhetorical question about Bill Maher that you, to my surprise, answered last week. You often talk about your disagreements with and general dislike of the anti-SJW community. I'm not sure if you are aware, but since the election of Donald Trump, there has been a growing rift in the anti-SJW community between the liberals who merely oppose political correctness and the thinly veiled right-wingers and nationalists. Would you consider having a conversation with someone who is anti-SJW but also opposes figures like Trump and supports progressive causes? Most of the anti-SJW community online, whether or not they are just liberals who are tired of political correctness, or they are the sort of white nationalists in disguise that you talk about, the community is still full of misogyny and racism and rape apology and cyberbullying and excuses made and rationalizations of all those things I just said. There's a lot of toxicity on the, well, they're just liberals who are tired of political correctness side too. And by the way, that's not a position I respect. If you're saying, look, we have a lot of things that we agree on, I just think that political correctness is bullshit. Well, then I don't want to talk to you, because I think you're full of shit. And you probably are someone who I would at best find tedious and at worst find just to be a loathsome personality, whether we agreed that Donald Trump was a fucking monster or not. There's lots of people, I'm sure there are lots of awful people who have YouTube channels that do nothing all day but attack teenagers and promote rape apology and bully trans people and spread misinformation and vilify feminists and Muslims, who I would have all kinds of things in common with other than those things, but I don't care, because I think those people are garbage. So no, in general, I would not be interested in talking to them and finding common ground. I wouldn't piss on them if they were on fire. I don't care how much common ground we have. I think they're bad. I think they're bad. Gentle Hum 1. Happy question. This Friday marks the return of new episodes of Mystery Science Theater 3000 to Netflix, the first since the show was canceled in 1999. I know you are a big fan, so is there anything you are looking forward to in the new season with Jonah Ray and the new cast? Anything you might be afraid of their changing compared to the old show you know and love? Disclaimer, as a Kickstarter backer, I've already seen the first episode in a private screening. You're going to like it. Hi, Kiba! I'm not really worried about it or anxious about it. I'm curious to see Patton Oswalt as TV's son of TV's Frank. I'm curious to see how Felicia Day does as the new head mad scientist. Obviously, I'm curious to see what I think of Jonah compared to Joel or Mike, because I loved both Joel and Mike. I'm curious to see what he brings to the table as the host. I'm curious to see how I react to the new voices for Crow and Tom. I'm curious about a lot of it, but I'm not super worried about any of it at this point, because the show has always been very malleable in the past. They've had cast changes in the past. They've had changes in the fiction of the show, you know, when Joel left and Mike came on, and then when the show moved from Comedy Central to Sci-Fi and Pearl took over as the main villain. You know, they've weathered changes and they've altered their premise in the past. So I think the show is malleable enough and elastic enough to survive that, as long as the riffs are funny. If the show is funny when those little silhouettes are at the bottom of the screen and they're making fun of the movie, then everything else I think falls into place. So as long as that is clicking, I think I'll be fine. Joe McClory, a few weeks back I asked a question about how you got started. Thank you for answering that one, but the more I think about it, I didn't really ask the question that I really wanted answered. How did you, and how do you, manage to find yourself taking risks to do new things instead of just looking at your life as it is and thinking, this is good, sure it could be better, but that way is risky, and besides, there is a new bit of distraction to latch onto. With so many ways to escape the dull parts of life, and with it being so much easier to coast, how do you get new shows and projects past the pie in the sky phase? I find myself with so many good ideas, but seldom have the will to act on them. Not sure if I need advice or encouragement, so I guess this is my way of asking for a little of both. For me, a lot of my motivation comes in the form of routine, and getting into a routine, setting your own deadlines and meeting those deadlines and getting used to a schedule and a regular production mode. You know, that is very important to me for my motivation for getting the work done in terms of my YouTube channel. But that can also be a trap, because when you get used to that, you get into a groove, and pretty soon that groove turns into a rut, and you're just doing that. And even if you want to get out of the rut, even if you want to do things other than what you're doing now, that's the toughest part, is making the decision to change. But it's never as difficult as you think it's going to be once you actually get around to doing it. To me, it's always the getting around to doing it, the finding time, and the finding the will to do it. Once you get past that point, the rest of it is, oh, this is great. Why didn't I do this before? And you know what? This next part is going to be great too. I'm going to wonder, why didn't I do this before? Because it's time to be done with the long-winded answers to questions and to move into something a bit snappier. A little something I like to call
the lightning round.
Der Wunderbar, man, I'm telling you, I got a bad feeling about this drop. Do you have a bad feeling about this drop? Der Wunderbar, you always say that. You always say you have a bad feeling about this drop. The Twick. Every year when I fill out my tax forms, I check no on the question referring to giving $3 to the Presidential Election Fund. My knee-jerk response is that there is so much dark money involved in elections, I don't want any politician getting even $3 from me. Am I right to skip this manner of funding? I prefer to give my money to a specific candidate. I guess given the current system, that makes sense. You know, you don't want to give your money to everybody or to the people who would claim public funding. You just want to give it to a specific candidate. Although if my suggestion that I made last week ever became reality, then giving money to a particular candidate would be a thing of the past. You could still give to, like, you know, super PACs and stuff, but you couldn't give to a specific candidate's campaign because everything would be publicly funded, at least at a certain level. Malevolent Divinity. Is it fair to say that Superman's at his best when he has the power to punch people but doesn't? Is it fair to say that any superheroes at their best when they have the power to resolve a situation with violence but utilize a more peaceful approach? Yes, I would say the answer to both questions is yes. I would say yes. That's the essence of being, that's what makes superheroes interesting. When they have the power to create great havoc and destruction, and instead they choose to use that power for something good and something positive, you know? Superman has the power to punch somebody, but he doesn't. He finds some other way to handle it. Absolutely. Absolutely. Existential, and that takes writing, by the way. That takes creativity. Any dipshit can write a story where Superman punches the bad guy. It takes someone with talent and vision and a concept and a story and an understanding of the character to write a Superman story where he doesn't punch the bad guy. The fucking punch the bad guy is easy. When you want to be a storyteller, when you want to be a writer, then you have to think of something else. And that's when you get to the good stuff. Existential anarchist. What do you read nowadays? Except you're an atheist read series. As far as books, unfortunately, not that much. I read the Washington Post every morning. I subscribe to the electric. I subscribe to the electric edition of the paper. I subscribe to the e-edition of the Washington Post, and I read that, most of it, every morning. And I read stuff online all the time. I'm always reading like articles and blog posts and stuff like that. But in terms of books, unfortunately, not a whole lot lately. Sad, really. Kevin Logan, what's the point of Montana? Seriously, fuck you, Montana. Montana's there to keep people in Wyoming from getting to Canada. Because they start going north, they get about halfway through Montana, and they either go to hell with this and turn back, or they die. And I think it was done at Canada's request. Crowbro, hey Steve, please compare and contrast Batman and Zorro. Well, Batman's American, Zorro is Mexican. Batman's cowl has horns on it, Zorro's doesn't. His is just more of a mask over his head and his eyes. Zorro uses a sword. Batman uses all kinds of bat-shaped implement. Batman has a car. Zorro doesn't have a car. They're both rich, so there's that. That concludes my comparison contrast of Batman and Zorro. J. Dottify, Steve, if I remember, I'm going to try that whole thing again. J. Dottify, Steve, I remember really enjoying Superman 5, The Quest for Peace. That's actually Superman 4, The Quest for Peace. When I saw it in the cinema as a kid, I was probably about 7. I have not seen it since. Is it really as shit as people say? Possible one for late seating. We must be about the same age, because it was I was 7 when that movie came out. It's not that bad. I mean, it's a bad movie. Like, it's an awful movie. It's terrible. It's cheesy. It's poorly written. Special effects are awful. It's not a good movie. But I watch it and I have a good time because I love Superman and I love Christopher Reeve and I love bad movies. And I don't think, no, it's not terrible. As for late seating, I don't know about that. Jason is pretty strict about the movies we watch on late seating. It has to be considered either a classic or like an infamously bad movie. And I don't know if Superman 4 quite qualifies as either one. It might qualify for like infamously bad, but I don't know. Maybe in the future. Maybe the next time we feel like doing a superhero movie, we'll consider it. Becca Hawkins. Hi, Steve. Are you planning to go see the new Case for Christ movie? Or since you've already thoroughly analyzed the book for an atheist reads, would it feel superfluous to go see it even for ironic reasons? I'm going to wind up seeing it eventually. Not in the theater, but you know, when it comes out on video on demand or something, I'll probably watch it. And after I see it, I'll make a video about it. Yeah, I'll see, because when I was reviewing the book was about answering the arguments. And the movie I'll review as a movie. I won't pay attention just to, you know, the arguments for Christianity. I'll review it as a film. And that'll be a completely different exercise. And that'll be interesting. And hopefully it's bad in ways that are fun. Radical Bacon. I kind of want to kick that white guy who was wearing a Preborn Lives Matter t-shirt in the balls. There's something about the appropriation of the BLM slogan that makes me extra salty about this anti-abortion thingy. Am I wrong? Nope. I'm not saying you should kick the guy in the balls, but are you wrong for wanting to? No. 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 That was the last question. That's it for the questions. That's it for the lightning round. It's time now for the shout out. The shout out this week goes to the White Helmets. The White Helmets is an organization of volunteers who are working in Syria to save lives in the aftermaths of bombings and chemical attacks and various atrocities related to the Syrian civil war. The White Helmets is an organization that is dedicated to saving the most lives possible in Syria. They are the people who come in to dig people out of the rubble. They're the people who come in to give medical attention to those who have been injured in actions as a part of the Syrian civil war. They are people who are doing incredibly dangerous and sadly incredibly necessary work, and it only seems fitting to give them the shout out and to point you to their website, which is whitehelmets.org. So you can learn more about them and possibly donate to support them if you can afford it and if that's the sort of thing you feel compelled to do, in light of, as we mentioned at the beginning of this video, the Trump administration authorizing this completely pointless, superfluous military action that will accomplish nothing and isn't even meant to really accomplish something in Syria, following the tragic, awful, reprehensible, inexcusable chemical weapons attack on Syrian people that maimed and killed so many civilians. That whole situation is just a tragedy and is just awful, and the White Helmets are there in Syria doing the best they can to help. So that is the shout out this week. If you don't know about the White Helmets, and there's a documentary about the White Helmets as well that I believe is on Netflix that is worth checking out as well. So there you go. That's the shout out, the White Helmets. Check them out. I also want to tell you, as I always do at this time of the video, to check out the Lemme Listen podcast. The Lemme Listen podcasts are a group of podcasts that are created by my very good friend Jason Harding, also known as Jason with a D, the puppet master of Opinionville. There's a whole bunch of Lemme Listen podcasts that you can choose from, or you can just listen to them all. Fuck it. Do you not want to make choices? Just listen to them all. You have Let Me Finish, which is the original podcast in the family, which is co-hosted by Jason and Finite Atticus. There's American Monsters and How to Destroy Them, the hilarious improv comedy podcast. There is Filmtastic Voyage, which is co-hosted by Mike and Alex. There is Cinetific, the movie science podcast, which is co-hosted by Professors Jason and Aaron. There's Three for Adventure, the newest member of the Let Me Listen podcast family. And then last but not least, there is Late Seating, the belated movie review podcast, which is hosted by Jason and me. That's why I mention it last, because it's the one that I'm in, therefore it's the best. And this is the podcast where we look at movies that have a reputation for being great or for being terrible, and we give them a fresh review. We summarize the plot, we make fun of them, we say entertaining, hilarious jokes about the movie, and then we decide for ourselves whether or not the movie deserves its reputation, be that reputation good or bad. And if you listen to our most recent episode, you can hear our review of the classic 1954 Japanese kaiju movie, giant monster, the granddaddy of all giant monster movies, or at least the granddaddy of all kaiju movies, the original Godzilla, actually the Americanized version of the original Godzilla, Godzilla King of the Monsters, the American version starring Raymond Burr, who was sort of Forrest Gumped into the original Japanese film Gojira. We reviewed the original Godzilla in the newest episode of Late Seating, which is available today. So check it out, listen to that, listen to our past episodes of Late Seating. Listen to all of the episodes of all of the wonderful Lemme Listen podcasts by going to lemmelistenpodcast.com. Please, please, please listen to our podcast. We work very hard on it. Jason works hard on it. I sit in front of a microphone and remember what happened in a movie. But Jason works really hard, and that's why they're great. So give them a listen if you haven't before. That's it for me, everybody. I want to thank you as always for watching. I want to remind you to please leave a comment on this video to ask me your question for the next You Had to Ask video, because in order for these videos to happen, you have to ask. So leave a comment with your question for next time. You can ask me anything about anything. Nothing is too serious. Nothing is too silly. I will answer as many of your questions as I possibly can in the next video. So until then, take care, everybody. Hey folks, one more thing before I go. I hope you enjoyed this one, or got something out of it anyway. If you did, please like, share, and subscribe. And also, please consider helping me to make more videos like this one by supporting this channel through Patreon. You can go to patreon.com/SteveShives to become a patron for as little as $1 a month. That really, really helps me out. Just $1 a month is a huge benefit. You have no idea. But if you can afford to pledge a little bit more than $1 a month, $5 a month, $10 a month, even $20 a month, there are some extra perks that you can take advantage of, and you can find out all about all of the perks that are available to you at the various levels of support by going to patreon.com/Steve Shives. And I hope you do. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.